Hi, this is Rusty. Just a quick disclaimer that we have a section at about the 16-minute mark where we discuss the Lord of the Rings and the existence of mythical creatures, like elves and Santa Claus and other things like that. So if you have young kids that listen with you, you may want to skip that part. Thanks so much. Konnichiwa. Welcome to the Divinely Uninspired podcast, or as you might know it, the DUI podcast. We are so excited to be with you today. We're joined by Jeremy.
Hola. Buenos dias.
Buenos dias, mi hermano. Jeremy, you're getting ready for our trip to Guatemala?
Yep, it's one of three phrases I use when I'm in a Spanish-speaking country.
So as you're listening to this, listener, we are currently in Guatemala. We recorded this before we left. And so Jeremy and I are probably eating some good food and having some stomach issues. It tends to be the way it goes. So
Yeah.
But I talked to my doctor. He gave me an antibiotic to take with me in case I start feeling bad. You should call your doctor. He'll do it.
I'm just gonna see what happens.
It?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And joined with us as always. Well, not always, but most of the time, Penny.
Hey, everyone.
Good to see you. And Kyle, our student pastor, is with us today.
They brought me back.
We did. We thought we'd lure you in for one more go. So, Jeremy, what are you most excited about for Guatemala?
I love the people down there. They're really awesome. I'm excited to see Sam again. Haven't seen Sam in a while, and Sam is one of the guys down there, and he's awesome, and we've become friends. So I'm excited about that. But the food is amazing. I'm excited to eat quesadillas again, and as we talked about before, quesadilla is not what you expect, but it is delicious. So I'm super excited about that.
Excited about any steaks, maybe?
No, I will not be eating beef this time. I'm pretty sure we can zero on that was the culprit in our when we opened the bag. So you guys, I don't remember us talking about this. When we opened the bag, I immediately knew that it was going to be bad, and it was like then they had me cook it, and I cooked it as well done as I could possibly cook it, and then we all still got sick. But
Wait, I thought this was chicken fingers from the airport.
No, we concluded that it had to have been the steak.
So the beef there, if you go, because they don't have grocery stores and stuff, so the chicken is fresh. Like if you're eating chicken, that thing was probably running around just a few minutes ago. But beef obviously is a lot different. And so they just have it hanging on hooks outside of their houses, and who knows how long it's been hanging. So when they last night when they were we're having beef for dinner, I immediately was no. And then the generosity of the people, you have to do it because that was probably very expensive for them. And so we all ate it, and then we all got really, really sick for several days.
Yeah. So that's potentially what's in our future ahead. It's the rainy season down there right now. It's monsoon season.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me. We've never been during the rainy season.
Yeah, so they told us hey, be sure to bring a rain jacket because it's monsoon season. So
what about a poncho?
We have some of those upstairs.
Yep.
You can grab one. I've got my nice rain jacket that I've had for several years that I was angry when I had to buy it because I forgot a jacket.
Is it a Columbia?
No, but it's one of those expensive brands. I don't North Face or
Patagonia.
Something like that.
I just feel like everybody here has Columbia. I have Columbia. I feel like that's just
honestly, I couldn't tell you. I'd have to go look at it. Well, we got a whole lot more to talk about, but first thing first, here's our song. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're listening to Divinely Uninspired, podcast by Journey Church Shepherdsville, hosted by Jeremy Willis and me, Rusty Wilson. You can find us online at journeyshepherdsville.com. For questions or comments, email podcast@journeyshepherdsville.com. Maybe we'll feature your question or comment on a future episode. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the show.
I didn't listen. I didn't pay attention. Did you amend it or is it still?
No,
okay.
No. I just feel like don't fix something that's not broken.
You are getting the side eye right now.
That's okay.
I kind of feel like that Penny should sing the new theme song because she does
Hard
music.
pass.
So
Thanks, Jeremy.
let's do a theme, an addition to the theme song.
Sometimes you want to go to the podcast that makes fun of you.
Wait a minute. No, I'm the only female in here again. We're not picking on me.
What was it picking on? I just said you should sing it.
No, well, we will harmonize to it. That'll be fun. Rusty can lead, and I will harmonize to him.
Here, I'm going to give you a note. You harmonize.
Let's Go ahead, Kyle.
I can't sing. That's not a good
Go ahead,
idea.
Jeremy.
I don't sing either.
No.
You're
Please
the
stop.
one that sings.
Stop.
Okay, nobody's going to harmonize with me. Fine.
No, that was.
I wouldn't even know how to
that
harmonize.
out.
When I don't sing at all.
You just pick a note.
Yeah.
Just pick one.
I don't know what
I don't even know what a note is.
That is literally what harmonizing is. We just pick
I don't even
notes.
know what notes there are.
Okay.
Hey, do you guys want to be immortal?
No.
Yeah.
No. I mean,
Why
yes
not?
and no. No. Like, okay, the question is, 'cause I've talked about this before, people. So, immortal, do you stay the same age? Yes. But if you're just constantly getting older and older and older, no. Does that make sense?
Got it. So you don't
Because-
want to be like a walking corpse.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking like the human body past 100 years is pretty much not useful anymore. So you could live forever in that state. But like, okay, if you get to be immortal, if it like, I'm picking my prime age, which is probably like 35.
Oh,
So like if I get to be 35 forever, yes.
Yes.
But if I have to keep aging, no.
No, I'm going to say 30. 30 is the prime.
Yeah, I just turned 36, and I'm starting to feel like my
35,
body
you
is
start to
pretty
go
much
down.
useless. So
Or as I say, 35, it was my best year of running ever. I ran
Oh.
all my fastest races that year.
good for you.
There's also the HGH I was taking probably too.
Oh,
I didn't really take any
yeah.
HGH.
human growth hormone. What about you, Kyle? You want to be immortal?
Sure.
Okay. Like stay the same age, or just continue to age
Oh,
until
no,
you're
stay
just
the
like
same
a
age.
spinal column?
I'd stay the same age.
Okay.
I feel like that'd be the safe play.
Yeah. You're what, 27?
Yeah.
That's a good age. That's not yet started to go downhill. So
That's what my
scientists-
chiropractor says.
well, they're not real doctors. But the scientists have discovered that there are some immortal animals on our planet. They just happen to be jellyfish. So this is from my favorite website, IFL Science, hosted by Russian state media. Immortality exists, but to get it, you need to be a jellyfish, not a god or a vampire. Moreover, only one species of, I don't know how to say this, it's Cnidaran. So I'm going to guess that either the C or the N is silent. So it's either Cnidarian or Cnidarian or Cnidarian.
Nobody cares. It's a jellyfish.
Yeah, it is.
It's just a jellyfish.
So specifically the Turritopsis dornhi, which sounds like something from Game of Thrones. But this particular jellyfish has got multiple genetic factors that allows it to age forward, age backward, and then age forward again, and then backward. It's pretty incredible. And they don't think that they can apply this to humans yet, but that it might lie in the future.
So it's fascinating and it's cool until you read the last paragraph of the article and you realize that it actually has a shorter life expectancy than most animals. So yes, it can I don't know if you read the last paragraph or not, because I was super fascinated about this until I read that it was like it actually has a shorter lifespan than human beings. So it can change its aging process, but it still dies, and it dies actually faster than we do.
Well, it gets eaten, and it doesn't have a way to defend itself.
It's not immortal.
But it could be if it
But
wanted.
it could be. It's like an elf in Lord of the Rings.
Like
If
Benjamin Button.
it could live forever in a controlled environment, I guess. Is that what they're kind of saying?
Yes.
Like in a controlled setting where there's not anything that's going to eat it, or there's not something outside of itself that's going to change its life expectancy.
It's not going to die a natural death.
Yeah.
It just got old and died.
It just rejuvenates, right? I didn't read the article. I'm going to be very honest.
That's okay.
I also feel like, are we getting into the territory, and I'm stealing this from Nate Bargatze, but I kind of view this the way too. Are we getting into the territory sometimes with science where they just know we can't prove this isn't real? You know what
Right.
I'm saying? Does it really live forever, or is it just I have no way of being able to prove that this thing can't live forever? And they know that, so they're just like, oh, we found a jellyfish that lives forever.
I think that's the same thing they did with seahorses, and they were like, "Oh, this is the male seahorse," and they're like, "Hey, it's got babies coming out of it."
Yeah.
Well, yes, male seahorses, they are the ones that
Because these guys are
they-
so smart. Do they just know that people like us can't prove them wrong? So they just have these, this is what it is. And I believe in science, first of all. Don't take that as me thinking science isn't real. But, sometimes you read stuff and hear stuff and you're like, what? How do you even, prove that?
if you would have asked me pre 2016, if they were like, well, you just can't prove it wrong, then they're not going to know. But now it would just be like, no, that's your set of facts, not my set of facts. So at this point in time, to quote the Bible, what is truth?
And aren't jellyfish actually a bunch of actual animals together? So it's not a specific,
What?
I don't think that's true. I think you made that up.
No, I thought that jellyfish were a bunch of microorganisms that are. You should Google it real quick.
Okay,
They're microorganisms.
I'm going to look it up, but that is definitely not the case.
I appreciate the fact that Jeremy was looking at me like I should know about marine biology.
back me up here, Kyle. They're an organism of multitudes.
They might be.
That's what I'm saying. I think that they are multiple organisms that work together to make the jellyfish.
Sure.
It's not just one organism.
I
pretty sure that's
That
accurate.
does not sound right, but it could be.
So there are 10,000 species of cnidaria, and less than 4,000 of these are jellyfish. So that species, or I guess it's technically the phylum and the stuff. I don't know what that means, but it's
Look that one up.
It's a single entity. It's not a collection of entities.
Oh.
I think you're thinking of a coral reef.
No, I'm thinking of something, but it doesn't really matter. I don't really know that much about jellyfish.
Just got that.
All right. Well,
This
I'm not thinking of a
conversation's
coral
all
reef.
over the place.
we're kind of like chiropractors. We're not doctors. So let's keep going here because it kind of ties in since we know that these creatures cannot die a natural death, much like the elves in Lord of the Rings. Have you guys watched the new Rings of Power show?
Yes.
It is so good.
I thoroughly enjoyed it myself. What about you, Jeremy?
No, but I'm still looking. I was wrong. It's the Portuguese man of war, which is a type of kind of jellyfish that's multiple organisms. It's not all jellyfish. So I kind of knew what I was talking. I can't let it go until I figured it out. So I kind of knew what I was talking about, but then I quickly realized that I was wrong. But if you look up Portuguese man of war, it actually is.
All right,
So it doesn't matter.
This is what I'm going to do when I'm losing an argument with my wife. You're right, honey. I'm wrong. You're right.
Wikipedia is not wrong.
No, it's never been wrong in the history of it. So we love the new Lord of the Rings. It's fantastic. It's so good.
I haven't seen it.
Well, it's good. It's worth.
Are you going to watch it?
No.
Why not?
So I gotta be honest with you guys. I know that people think that I should. I did not enjoy the Lord of the Rings movies. They were too long. There were too many of them. It just took forever. And
Because
eventually,
you didn't watch the extended editions. Those
and
ones are
eventually
far
I got
better.
tired. And also, people are like, "You should read the books." Oh, I tried, and I could not. Too many, too long. Again,
Okay, I do agree with you to a sort that I feel like they have these prolonged conversations, and I'm like, this conversation's way too long. You guys need to move on. So
yeah.
it does have some boring parts.
Like I felt like how many words in the original Lord of the Rings? How many movies was it?
Three.
Three. Okay. I felt like it could have been two. Like and they didn't need to be as long as they were. Like it was just so long. Like they were just so many things that didn't need to be.
we can
Jeremy
agree to
coming in with the
disagree.
hot
I
takes
know.
on Lord of the Rings.
Now I get people love it, but I just same thing with Chronicles of Narnia. Too
I
long.
don't like the Chronicles.
Too
of
many
Narnia.
What?
movies.
Great movies.
No, I don't like them.
But you guys, it's not that I don't like Lord of the Rings. It's just too long. But
Okay.
maybe this show's better. I don't know.
I don't like a talking lion in the Narnia stuff.
We are off topic. Get back to this.
Okay, let's talk about Lord of the Rings because apparently.
I'm going to read about Portuguese man of war while you're doing it.
Sounds good. No, because you're going to want to weigh in on this. So people are upset. Not people. A certain set of people are upset about this new Lord of the Rings series because they believe that the new series is caving into quote unquote wokeness. Okay, the act of being woke. And so just so people know what wokeness is, being woke means that you are awake and aware and alert to the problem of racism. And now it's kind of become a pejorative of being consumed with social justice issues and things like that. But in this scenario, people are upset that there are a cast of diverse characters in the Lord of the Rings. So there are black characters in Lord of the Rings now. There are Hispanic characters in Lord of the Rings. And people feel that it is perverting and corrupting Tolkien's vision, which is based on English culture, which apparently English culture doesn't have any people of color in it, according to these people. So let's talk about this, and then we'll get into the article a little bit. Penny, you look fired up.
This irritates me to no other. These are groups of people that don't actually exist. There is no race. It's a made-up culture. So please, by all means, shut up.
This wasn't real. I was assuming that Lord of the Rings was all based on.
It was based on history.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I meant like these are like elves. These are
No,
like
yeah, for sure. This
hobbits.
is just
These are people that don't exist.
These are people that are just dumb. I mean, like to get upset about this, like it doesn't matter. Like it's all made up. Like they are factual in what we think about because this comes out of I'm assuming European culture. that it was Anglo-Saxons, which is white people. And so, yes, those stories originally took place in probably an Anglo-Saxon type of thing. But also, isn't like the whole thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm not a big Lord of the Ring fan. Isn't it like Middle Earth? Isn't that like what it's called? So it's called Middle Earth. So it's all of the Earth represented, right?
That would make sense to me. Yeah.
Like, because and this is my premise, wasn't in the first series of movies, like there were different, I don't want to say species, but different types of things. There were the elves, there were this, and then there were the humans, and they represented, or man, they represented all of Middle Earth, right? So, I mean, so what I'm saying is if the story is about the whole Earth, even though it came out of a European Anglo-Saxon context,
Right.
like then obviously there's going to be people of different races and backgrounds because the Earth has different races and backgrounds, right? Am I wrong? So
no,
these
you're
people,
right.
so these people are wrong even in their like theories, like or their things.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, does he specifically say in the books?
He said there were. I did read one line because again, I wish I loved Lord of the Rings. I wish I could get into it with you guys. But I did say where he said that the elves were fair faced or something like that, which you would assume would be, I guess.
Well, they are. They're all like kind of blonde, but none of the. I don't.
But
I don't
even in
think-
different cultures, like I mean, in different cultures, aren't there different skin tones within those
absolutely.
cultures?
Being,
So like
being fair skinned.
you could be an African American but have fair skin. You could be Hispanic but have fair skin or darker skin. Like so, I mean, I just don't understand why people are getting upset about this.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, elves don't exist.
What?
So why would we have them as a certain skin color? It makes
Penny, please. My children listen to this podcast. Elves absolutely exist.
okay.
I will have to edit
for
this.
Gemma. Just
in
for
all,
Gemma.
in all reality, I will have to edit this section out because my kids do listen to the podcast.
So Jeremy's the idiot for thinking that jellyfish are multiple organisms, but elves exist.
They do.
They do at the North Pole.
That's right. Elves and fairies and Santa and the Easter Bunny, those things all exist. But Lord of the Rings is fantasy.
So we're okay with lying now.
You guys, I'm my children. I am going to have to put a disclaimer at the beginning of this episode. I will actually go back and record a disclaimer. Hey, if you have children who
we
still
didn't bring up any of those things, but
I think you did.
Yeah.
No, you said elves aren't real, and my daughter, who is a clever
elves,
Okay.
girl,
elves in the sense of Lord of the Ring elves are not real.
Right.
But now
The
we're
whole
talking
thing
about
is
Santa
fiction.
Claus.
Yeah, you brought up Santa Claus. And all
well,
this.
because he's real, and
You did punch a heretic in the face once.
He actually is real. That's actually true. So he was real. But no, I think that you brought up the elves thing.
Okay, well, it's on me then. You know what, honey? You're right. I'm wrong. Getting used to saying that. So anyway, Brandon Morse is the editor of a website called Red State. Okay, we're not going to get into this too much about the politics side of things, though I understand how this might be hard to differentiate from that. But Brandon Morse has read J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings series, and watched extended editions of Peter Jackson's Ring trilogy so often that I can almost quote them line for line. But Morse is dreading a new addition to the Middle-earth canon that he says, quote, perverts and corrupts Tolkien's mythical medieval universe because TV showrunners have committed this storytelling crime. They are trying to wokeify Amazon's new series, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. So there are people who are genuinely upset and boycotting the show because they have cast non-white people into this fantasy world. And I don't know, I think that's a real problem that people are that upset. Like, we have more pressing things to be upset about in this world than whether fictional people are black, white, Hispanic, Asian. I don't know. I just think that this is ridiculous, personally.
I think that this goes back to, though, what we talked about last week about the news is because this is off the article you sent me is from CNN, but then this guy that is upset is from Red State, which I'm assuming is a news publication. Of some
that would be
sort.
my guess. Yeah.
So, like, why? Like, so you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, why is CNN even given this attention? Because obviously, this guy's a moron. Like, first of all, I mean, like, you need a life if you're spending that much time watching. And people can have their hobbies and stuff like that. I get that, but like, if you're that upset about it, like, you know, stop, number one. But second of all, like why, like seeing, you know what I'm saying? Like it's that idea of like the news just constantly feeding this.
Right.
And like you said, we don't want to get political about this, but like it has a political spin now.
Absolutely it does.
And so now it's like one of these things where like now wokeness is brought into it. So now we got different, and it's just why, like just why for all of them, everybody involved in these articles.
Yeah. And you said, well, why did they put it up there? Because people will click on it. I did. I saw, we've got to come up with stuff to talk about on the podcast. This is new. This is something that we've been talking about in the office about how we love this show, and somebody's just got to ruin it. But I do want to talk for just a second about what this other author has said. His name is Reverend Michael Corrin, and he wrote a book called J.R.R. Tolkien, the man who created the Lord of the Rings. And he had this to say about people being upset about the non-white casting. My most intelligent response would be, that's total bull malarkey. Okay, but he actually said something that we can't say because we're a clean podcast, only for families, with disclaimers at the top. Middle Earth is not history, it's fantasy. He says that he grew up in the United Kingdom during an era when it was common for popular shows to offer blatantly racist and anti-Semitic depictions of black and Jewish people. So for people of color, this is actually a really good thing that they are seeing themselves. And here's the other thing, and I at some point in time, like, we have to recognize we're all playing pretend with this stuff. They're all actors. They are playing pretend for a living. So why are we even, and they do this in the superhero stuff, and like they take it like Nick Fury. When Nick Fury in the comics was a white character, and then they brought in Samuel L. Jackson, and people are like, oh, they had to go and change his race or whatever. It's like, who cares? They're playing pretend. These are not real people.
It's the same with like the Captain America. It's the same. Actually, they just started doing this with House of Dragons. If you watch Game of Thrones, like it's unbelievable what people will come up with to complain about.
Yeah,
like, we have bigger issues to deal with.
And I think that, like, I mean, at the end of the day, like, people would just be like, hey, white people have had a pretty good run when it comes to media. Like, I mean, they used to hire white people and then paint their skin to play, other races.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we've had a pretty good run at it. And so it's like, who cares? Like, obviously, and like you said, it's a fantasy world. Like, who cares? Like,
There's magic.
Yeah. It just...
As a fantasy world, it would make more sense that that they be of different race.
Yeah.
Like a whole group, like the elves would be of one race and somewhere else from a different part of the world.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah. It's definitely not worth getting upset about. It's upsetting that people are upset about this is I guess the best way that I can say it. So anyway.
Wait, this was not good for my mental health, as we discussed last week.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
About reading news.
But we all agreed that it's dumb, so it should be good for you.
Yeah.
We all agreed.
That this is a small minority of people who are actually upset.
Now, if one of us had been like, oh, that makes total sense, then I'd be like, well, you're fired.
Would not be good for the work environment.
Yeah. We would just not air the podcast, and we
have a closed door meeting.
That's right.
Yep.
Love those. Those are great. Okay, so let's talk about tithing for a second. Does everybody here know what tithing is?
Yes.
Yes.
What is it? What's a tithe?
It's a 10% or a tenth of like a amount or a product of some sort, right? So that's a tithe.
It is. Yes. So what's interesting is that new data has just come out by Barna that shows the perception of current Christians, practicing Christians, what their perception is of the tithe, what it is, how many of them give a tithe, and what the churches are teaching about these things. And it's pretty interesting. So 2 in 5 practicing Christians give at least 10% of their annual income as a tithe. So 2 in 5. So let's just go around the room and everybody just tell how much of a percentage of your income you give, and then we'll,
I don't care. I tell people.
No,
all the time.
I don't actually want to do that.
Yeah.
But it's. I want to read this section to you from this article because it's very, very fascinating.
Can't you look all that up just real quick? Because like, aren't tax returns like? Can't you like find that out?
What people give?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure you could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you like knew what you were looking for. Anyway,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. But I'm pretty sure like all that stuff is like. Yeah. All right.
Probably. When it comes to generosity within the local church, just 21% of Christians set their church giving at 10% or more of their income. Typically, their giving varies at 37%, while one quarter, 25%, doesn't give to their church at all. Practicing Christians are much more likely to set their giving to at least the customary 10% tithe at 42%, though that means the majority of practicing Christians is still giving in lower or less predictable amounts. So there's a couple of things going on here. The article gets into the fact that there's a large portion of Christians who don't even know what the word tithe means. 57% of Christians don't know what tithe means. They just think tithe is the thing that you give. It's another word for an offering or a donation. When there's a smaller minority of people who understand, no, it's a tenth, like what Penny so eloquently defined for us a few minutes ago. So what I found most interesting in this, though, was that 25% of Christians don't give to their church at all. And now I know that we could go into like, well, are they practicing versus non-practicing? And then you get into, well, what does that even mean? How often do they go to church?
I mean, I want to say this, like, and not because of what I do, and obviously I manage a budget and stuff like that. But I will say this, first of all, from my listening to this journey, I have no idea who gives and doesn't give. The only people in our entire church that I know how much they give is staff. And my rule has always been, if you're going to make some money off Jesus, you better be making sure that you're giving. And I don't even know how much they give. I just want to make sure that they're like giving back. So when I say that, I don't even know how much they give. But just I want to make sure our staff is giving back to the church. But I'm honestly shocked that it's only 25%. Like I actually expected that number to be much higher.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, so I guess in one side of it, that's encouraging. And it doesn't really show here an age breakdown of who's giving what. And if I had to guess, I'm going to guess that your tithers, your people who are giving 10% or more, are going to be your older adults, your boomer generation, your Gen X generation, and then maybe some of your oldest millennials.
Well, and also, is there a breakdown among what type of churches? Because
no,
I have a feeling you will see a lot more people giving in more Protestant.
Well, I mean,
type of
there's
churches.
also churches that if you don't give a percentage of your income, you can't be a part of that church. Like there are actual like churches that is like a rule. Like they have full, because of course their teaching is like everything's God, so they have full access to your financial records and stuff.
Well, you throw in like prosperity gospel and all that too. So.
Yep.
Well, so the question is, when the average Christian thinks about a tithe, what are they thinking about? Are they thinking about it being exclusively financial, or are they saying, well, I give 4% financially to the church of my income, but I'm giving 30% of my free time to the church, So is there some like mental gymnastics that we do sometimes when it comes to that type of thing? Or am I the only one who's ever done that? Because I'm confessing.
Nope.
I think everybody does that.
I do think, and we're going to talk about this in what Jeremy thinks, so we might be putting the cart before the horse, but I do think maybe not so much the idea of, well, I give 6% to my church, if I give 30% of my time to my church, but I also do think that when we talk about being generous and tithing, we're automatically thinking about the church. Well, like we have missionary friends that we support, that we give a check to every month outside of what we give to our church. We also support some other organizations and stuff like that. So we are giving of our income. It's not and most people say traditional sense, a tithe, because it's not going directly to the church, but it is going to, organizations and stuff that we think are making the world a better place. And so that's also another side of it, is when we talk about being generous with this 10%, and we'll talk about where that number is even kind of made up here in a second. Like people give to other and there's lots of good organizations to give to, and causes to give to. And so I think that's another tricky part of the conversation is it not only your time per se, but also you're giving to other organizations as well.
So let's just go ahead and dive right into it. Let's hear what Jeremy thinks about this. So here's the specific question that we wrote down for you, Jeremy. How much should a Christian give to the local church? That's question number one. Are we bound to the tithe of the Old Testament? That's question number two. And then the bonus question is, what in the world happened with Ananias and Sapphira in Acts, where they drop dead after Peter's like, you said you gave this much, but you really only gave this much, and now you are being carried to your grave. So let's hear.
What does Jeremy think?
All right. So anybody that's ever been a part of our church and knows that I don't like to talk about money very much. I talk about it maybe once a year, and then every once in a while, staff tells me I have to talk about it because we have needs. And but I don't like messing with it because I grew up in church, and part of my own experience is just, man, it was talked about all the time. Like, I mean, there was hardly a Sunday that it wasn't mentioned. And I understand like churches do like offering meditation, but I'm talking about the sermon. I'm talking about in, literature you were handed and stuff like that. Like, we just talked about it all the time, and that kind of burnt me out a little bit on it. And the other side of it is, so many people talk about money, and it's always, and we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, in these organizations and stuff like that. And so, and obviously we've had, ministers that have abused it, who was it recently said they had to have a private jet? It's that one guy, Kenneth Copeland. And then that one wasn't good enough, so he had to have another private jet. Oof. So he's got 2 private jets that his church funded for, First of all, I think it would be awesome to own a private jet. I don't know anybody needs a private jet, And he said he couldn't fly on commercial flights because of the people that were on the flights. And I'm like, well, aren't those the people you're trying to minister to?
He said it would be like flying in a tube full of demons.
Yeah. So anyway, so obviously that's an example of people abusing it and stuff like that. So that's why I don't like to talk about it very much. But I do think, the Bible talks about money a lot. In fact, over 800 times. It talks about money. Over half, I think it's actually like around 60 or 70% of Jesus's parables talk about money. And so he obviously wasn't afraid to talk about it. So we do have to talk about it and that type of thing. So first of all, how much should a person give to their church? I think was the first question. However much they want is usually my response. When we think about tithing, and Penny said 10%, and that's what most people think. A lot of that teaching comes out of the Old Testament. What's fascinating is you actually run the numbers of what they were expected to give in the Old Testament. It actually comes out to like 20 to 25%. So the 10% is a portion of that, and you can see that in Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and 2 Chronicles and Nehemiah. You can look up all these verses if you want. But the 10% kind of came out of that. Now, what they would give is 10% of their seed, fruit, flocks were given to the church, which were then in turn to support the Levites, which were kind of the ones that kind of ran the church. And then in turn, the Levites gave a tenth of what they gave to the chief priests. And all of a sudden, and now there was this system where the church can be supported through the giving of livestock and fruits and vegetables and these type of things, which in their culture was kind of currency. That's what you did. You didn't carry a lot of money. You used the resources you had. So that's where that all comes from. But again, that 10% is only part of what they were giving. When you actually run all the numbers, and you can do this if you want to look into it, it usually came out to 20 to 24%. So if we're going to talk about tithing from the Old Testament, we're actually lowballing by saying 10%. You see some of this mentioned in the New Testament with Jesus, where he's referring to the 10% when he talks to the Pharisees. But at no point does he ever say that that's what people are supposed to give. Does that make sense? Like, he's never definitive in those statements. What he's saying in those statements is he's actually lecturing them, because he's saying you give 10% of this, your mint and then stuff like this to the church, but in turn you actually treat people terrible that you could actually be helping. Like, you're giving it all to the church, you're not actually helping these people. And so he kind of, even the few times we see it in the New Testament, it's mentioned, but it's never like a commandment. Does that make sense? And Paul really doesn't talk about it at all. All Paul talks about is just being generous with what you've been given. And I think that's the bigger part of it. So I know people that preach 10% tithe, and I know, like, if you grew up in church, that's probably the number that you hear. But you got to do them a lot of massaging of text in order to make that still apply today. Now, I might be shooting myself in the foot because somebody's going to hear this and be like, oh, I don't have to give money to my church anymore. No, the Bible is very clear about generosity and being generous. So what I tell people when they talk to me about giving, and even when I talk from the stage, what I tell people is we are supposed to be generous. The Bible talks about that. Jesus specifically talks about you can choose. There's 2 gods you can choose. You can choose God, or you can choose money. And money is a god. And I think for a lot of us, and especially America, we've talked about this before, we've chosen which God we're going to serve. And it's typically resources and financial and money. The Bible does talk about, Paul talks about teach those who are rich in this life, how to be generous. And so, it's something we have to do. And so I tell people when they ask how much they should give, here's what I say. First of all, don't give out of guilt. Give because you want to be generous. So if you're in a church where the only reason you're giving is out of guilt, then, the Bible even talks about just keep it. you know, and I think this is, we're going to tap into, that was part of Ananias and Sapphira's downfall, which is one of the most bizarre stories in the Bible. But that was part of it, was they were giving out of this guilt, it seems like, and that type of thing. So don't give out of guilt. Give because you want to be generous. My definition of generosity is assuming that everything you've been given is not for yourself. That's generosity. Most people I know that are generous don't give because I preached a sermon about generosity. They decide ahead of time that they're going to be generous. Does that make sense? You know, people that are generous are not the people that hear the Sarah McLachlan, you know, dogs. Yeah. Yeah. That's not generosity. That is responding to some type of guilt. Generous people that I've experienced are people that decide from day one, I'm going to give a portion of what I give to these organizations, these causes, to your church, that type of thing. So they've pre-decided that they're going to be generous. And part of that is, you know, do you have your money and you control your money, or does your money control you? And those are the two sides of that coin that I see. So most people that I think of that are generous are people that have pre-decided. So I tell people, you know, 10%, and I'll be full disclosure. Me and my wife give away about 15% of our income. 10% of it we give to the church, and then 5% of it we give to other organizations. And I'll show you my tax numbers and all that. 10% was always just nailed into my head, so that's where that number kind of came from. But to prove it with the Bible, does that make sense? Like, I don't know if we're going to get that formula. So I tell people, pick a percentage that works for you, especially if you've never given before. Start at 2%, see what happens, you know? And if you still feel good after 2%, you know, jump to 5%, jump to 10%. I will say, me and my wife have been doing this for 15 years, you know, and obviously tithed before, you know, we got married. I never miss that money because I budget assuming that it's not going to be there, you know, that type of thing, because we want to be generous people. And like I've already said, we don't give all of our money specifically to the church. We have missionary friends that we support. There's other organizations, some that aren't even Christian organizations, you know, that we believe in, and we believe in what they're doing in this world. And so we give to those as well. And so I think when it comes to this, you know, and I'm not sure if I'm answering it the way that I'm supposed to, but, you know, it really comes down to be generous. Be generous is what you've been given, you know, and that type of thing. And as far as how much, I just want to challenge people with just set aside a certain amount and decide you're going to give that. Do that at the beginning of every year when you set your budget, that type of thing. And then obviously throughout the year, if there's stuff that comes up, even here at church, I mean, there's expenses. We had to replace an HVAC unit not too long ago. We had to replace a roof last year. So when those causes come up, then yeah, we as generous people are going to respond to those and give what we can. But as far as the tithing of 10%, and I know a lot of preachers, and I would love to talk to them about it if that's what they're preaching, because you're massaging a lot of texts to make that a commandment of something that somebody has to do, if that makes sense.
So what about Ananias and Sapphira?
So I have wrestled with this story so much. And part of it is, if you know my kind of personal theology journey, you know, I think that, I don't want to say the God of the Old Testament, but like, I think Jesus comes along and clears so much stuff up with how we understand Jesus. And then obviously when you see Paul's writings and Peter's writings, all that stuff, there's a lot less deaths, a lot less violence, that type of thing. Obviously in the Old Testament, you know, you have some of these stories that are ancient stories. And sometimes I do believe that, not that they're embellishing the stories, but they're telling parts of the story because they're trying to make a point. And the best way to make a point is through violence and anger and these type of things. But Ananias and Sapphira take place after Jesus. And so I don't really know what to do with it, but my gut feeling on why it happened is, you know, if you don't know the story, they sell a piece of land, and then they come to the church and they present the offering in front of Peter, and they're basically like, hey, we gave all of it, you know, and they didn't. They had kept some of it. And so I think the problem is they lied. You know, the other side of it is, you know, I don't know why they got put to death. You know, that's the part that I wrestle with. But if they'd have just been honest, you know what I'm saying? Because I mean, we sold land. We're only giving 75%. We're keeping 25%. Okay. But it was just that whole like pomp and circumstance, like they were these like super righteous, holy people, you know. And I think that, I guess, you know, again, I don't know why they had to be struck down. It's so weird. But I think part of it may come back from like when Jesus does the story where you have the widow that just gives her coin, and then you got the guy that is dumping all that money. And for Jesus, it was like, don't do the show. Like, just who gave more? Well, it was the woman that didn't make a big deal out of it. It was the woman that just went in and dropped her coin in, and she was giving so much more because of her generosity. And so I'm wanting to think that Ananias and Sapphira, and I got to think there's some reading into that. There were probably some other issues with those people before that story. Like, they just seem like the people that are just like trying to be like, look at me, look how awesome I am. So I have no idea why that story happened, to be honest with you.
It is a bizarre story.
It is so bizarre. And it's so like, if that had taken place in like Leviticus, I wouldn't even bat an eye. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd just be like, okay, like that happened. But because it takes place in the book of Acts, it is one of those kind of strange ones.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you were expecting a, nice, neat, tied up with a bow answer on Ananias and Sapphira,
You're not getting it from me.
you're not getting it from Jeremy. But there are other pastors out there who will tell you exactly why it happened.
If
So-
you tied 10% to their church.
What's
right.
the childhood Sunday school song? Revelation
And Sapphira
21:8.
got together to conspire to plot
Oh.
the key. I can't remember. I just remember it was like a rhythm. There was actually a song.
Oh,
They
okay.
taught us that in kids' church. It's like Ananias and Sapphira got together to conspire, plot, to cheat, to get the church ahead. And they end up dying in the song. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, they taught us that in kids' church. Like,
just
they teach us
remember-
a song where they get killed. Like, there were emotions. Like, we're just.
Oh, there's a ton of kid songs now that I look back on. It's like, what? This was really morbid. Like, we had this song that we would sing when I was a kid about the Titanic.
Yeah.
And, do you guys know that one?
No.
They built the ship Titanic to sail the ocean blue, and they built it so the water couldn't come through. But they sent them down below where they weren't supposed to go. Well, they sad when this big ship went down. It was sad. It was sad. It was sad. It was sad. It was sad when the great ship went down to the bottom of the husbands and wives, little children lost their lives. It was sad when the great ship went down. Way
All
down.
right, here's the lyrics of these songs. God loves a cheerful giver. Give it all you got. When you're down and out, without a doubt, you're in an awful spot. When the odds are up against you and you cannot do a thing, praise God. To serve him is a joyous thing. So great. It's good. That's a good message. Ananias and Sapphira got together to conspire, plot, to cheat the church and get ahead, but they knew the power that the Spirit had. They lied to Simon Peter, and they both dropped dead. And we had like motions to this. Like this whole like in kids' church, they're teaching us a song, a worship song, but the last line is they lied to Simon Peter, and they both dropped dead. Yep.
Well, it's history, I guess.
Yeah.
Traumatizing.
So any questions about that? Because like I said, I think there is so much confusion about tithing and where it comes from and that type of thing. And so, I mean, if you grow up, I don't know, and Penny, like you immediately jumped to 10% as the definition. So,
Well, because I grew up in a Baptist church, so it has been ingrained like in my mind since I can remember taking an envelope. Like we would, even as like a toddler, you would take an envelope with you to start learning that you take an offering to church.
Yeah.
And also, I'll be very honest with you, like there was also talk, like if someone lost their job or something, they'd be like, oh, they weren't tithing. They weren't tithing. So it's been ingrained that you were, bad things were happening if you weren't giving at least 10% to your church. So the question is, I guess, is God blessing those that only give?
well, and I think that's the other flip side of it we didn't discuss is that preachers and teachers tie the blessing of God to a tithe, and there just isn't any, like in the Bible, there is no connection really. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
there just isn't. Now there's some verses that like hint at like God blessing people and that type of thing, but the actual connection between giving 10% of your income to your church and God blessing you, or like, especially the prosperity stuff that like all these things are going to happen. I started giving 10% to my church and then next month a check for $3,000. Well, great, but that doesn't happen to most people. That might have just been a coincidence. That might have just been, one of those things. But that's the other danger of it is people, and they're really misogyn texts when they start doing that, and that's the other side of it.
Okay, so here's my other question. If, let's say you take your 10%, you split it into different percentages amongst different organizations that are not connected to your church. Let's say someone that's going to Southeast, it's a huge church, and they decided to not give their tithing to Southeast, but to spread it among other organizations, or maybe to a church that is struggling. Is that still considered tithing?
Well, I mean, by my definition, yes. But my definition of tithing is different than a lot of people's. Even the 10% number, like that's just what we do, because we same as you, I was taught that as a kid, so that's the number that sticks with me. But here's the deal. Me giving 10% of my income is generous. For some people, that's not generous at all because they make so much money. Does that make sense? They make so much money that, yeah, they're giving a percentage, but they could actually give so much more. Other people that don't have the income, they could not maybe give that much. Does that make sense?
So is it important to start with your church when you're giving?
Yeah, I'm going to say yes because we need people to give. Right. But no, I think that's a good place to start. But I will say this, and I've said this from the stage. when it comes to this percentage giving, you need to find an organization that you trust that is going to use those resources in a way you need to trust, because part of being generous is it's not yours anymore. So, but you do need to trust those organizations to continue that. So I always tell people from the stage when we do our Give Sunday, I said, if you don't trust me, if you don't trust what we're doing here, find somewhere you can, feel good about your giving and give to them. At the same time, and I'll tell those people all the time, I'll tell you how much the church pays me. I mean, I wouldn't rat any of you guys out. That's not the right word. But you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't hide anything. Like every year at Christmas, we put a paper out on the front desk that says where every penny that we spend is going. Does that make sense? I mean, so there's nothing to hide. We've had people email me and say, hey, can you send me your financial documents? And I'm not going to send them everything, but I will send them the breakdown of our budget and how much we spent on money, how much we gave away, that type of stuff, because we want to be above board on all of that. I'm not sure all churches are above board on that, and that's probably some of the hesitation. So when you ask the question, should you give to your church first? I think so, as long as your church is doing good things with that money. Because here's the thing, part of maybe some of the issue that we even have here at Journey is there are so many good organizations. And so what happens sometimes is I'm just going to give to all these organizations, and then the giving at church goes down. Well, your money, so your $200 a month you're giving to this organization, $200 a year to this organization, however much you give, that's great. But imagine if we pulled all of our money together. Does that make sense? Right. And then we're able to give to that organization. Well, which number is going to be bigger? It's going to be when we pull all of our resources together. Does that make sense? And Absolutely. So I think that is part of the idea of giving to your church is, well, Journey, generally we, and this is not a biblical thing. This is something we did. We give away every year 10 to 20% of what comes in. So 10 to 20 cents of every dollar you give is going out of this organization. It's not paying for staff. It's not paying for our building. It's definitely not paying for our parking lot. It's not paying for any of those things. It's going out into our community or out to our international partners. And so we believe that we're a trustworthy organization, and so you should give. Now, if you don't trust us, that's fine. Or like you said, hey, let's say your cousin's starting a church and they're going to need some resources. We had people from Oklahoma, where I grew up, and even North Bullitt, the church I worked at before I worked here, that tithed to Journey the first couple of years just to help us out. You know what I'm saying? And that was awesome, And so, from me, my perspective, again, I don't know how much anybody gives or who gives at our church. So yeah, I think that there are other churches, as we've already said, that if you gave to other churches or other organizations, they would not be okay with that. But I think they're wrong. So, and I would tell them that and then punch them. No, just kidding. I wouldn't punch them. Well, some of them might.
All right. Well, that was what Jeremy thought.
That's what Jeremy thought.
So we got some stuff coming up here at Journey that we want to let you know
about. I like
about.
how we ended that segment on me punching people when I really wouldn't, but it was just like it just ended. Like
well, I thought that was a good landing
timing.
spot. Yeah, so
I've been reading a lot about Portuguese man of wars though too, so they're actually pretty fascinating. Multi-celled creatures, multi-organistic.
We're gonna give you your own podcast, and it's gonna be called Jeremy's Man of War podcast. It's very creative, and you're gonna just educate all of us about.
Ooh, that would be a good name for like a men's ministry, the Man of War. Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. All right.
We can sing that Sunday school song where
everybody drops dead.
That's right. Okay.
I will march in the infantry, shoot the artillery.
That's right.
Yeah.
I forgot about that one. We should do a whole podcast one time about all the messed up songs we learned in kids' church.
Yeah.
Or oh no, you guys have already talked about the things that we've heard said from the stage about Bible stuff, but
yeah.
All right.
Anyways, sorry.
No, it's okay. It happens. I'm tired today. I took NyQuil last night, and I am just not feeling it today. So battling.
Well, you are feeling the NyQuil.
I'm feeling that, yes, but I'm not feeling the energy. I'm not feeling the energy because usually I come in here shot out of a cannon. So we have plenty of things going on here at Journey. If you have a child in our children's ministry, specifically in the preschool and kindergarten age, we have an event coming up on September 18th. You can check in with Kira or the Journey app about that. And then on October 2nd, we have an event for the 1st through 5th graders. You can check in with her about that. That's called Cliffhanger. The one on the 18th is called Always. It's a family event. And then the one on the 2nd is called Cliffhanger. So more details about that can be found on the app. Saturday, September 24th is our Fall Fest. We're really excited about it. We're doing it at the park this year, so we have some more space where we're all going to have, instead of things being across the street and behind the building and all that, it's all going to be in one self-contained place. That's from 4 to 7 p.m. on Saturday, September 24th. We need volunteers for that, so if you'd like to help with that, you can go to the app and you can click the little Fall Fest button, then there'll be an opportunity there for you to volunteer. For everything else happening at Journey, you can check out the Journey app. We're trying to constantly keep that updated so that you know what's going on here. Okay, we got one last thing to talk about before.
This is fun.
Yeah, this one's fun. Before we call it. So, moms are out in force and they are angry because there's a new cartoon TV show. It's an adult cartoon TV show. It's not
on FX.
On FX, which is mostly an adult network. But the show is called Little Demon. And it stars Aubrey Plaza, who is most famously known as April Ludgate from Parks and Rec. And she is an antichrist because
Her character is.
Yes, her character is an antichrist because her father, played by me, Danny DeVito, is the devil. And moms are really upset, and they think that Disney should pull this show because Disney, way up the food chain, owns FX. So Disney is trying to turn our children into little demons. And I just want to talk a minute about this show, but then I want to know, what shows were you not allowed to watch as a kid, but you watched them anyway?
So turning them into demons. They're not already demons.
I was about to say
Yeah,
it,
right.
but I don't have kids, so I can't say things like that.
Nah, you can say it. You've seen
Yeah.
kids.
Okay, first off, the first sentence
Yeah,
in this
you're a mom.
article
You're a
is
mom. Go ahead.
pretty good, actually.
The first sentence, if you would like to know what the first sentence of this article it is, what are we mad about today? There's no shortage of options. Soaring temperatures in California, rising costs of living across the nation, weird stuff going down at Mar-a-Lago, Corey Asbury's fingernails. But I don't know what that is. But all of that has to be tabled because we've found the real enemy of our present era, a cartoon.
So my first response is to this is don't watch it. Like, just don't. Like, I mean, that's my thing with everything is don't like it, don't watch it. You know, the argument of, well, it's owned by Disney. Disney owns so many things. It's unreal how many things that Disney actually owns. And so, like, there's probably all kinds of stuff that Disney owns that you're not going to like. And so it's like, just don't. I mean, just don't watch it. It's on FX, which is not a kid-friendly network. I mean, there's several shows on FX that I like. I would not watch any of them with my children. And so that's your, you know, if you want to watch those shows, that's your choice. But yeah, just don't put it on when your kid's there. You know, the fact that it's a cartoon, like, apparently they never heard of Adult Swim. I mean, like, there's a whole, you know, slot on, was it Cartoon Network or
Cartoon
whatever,
Network.
that just geared towards adults, and your kids should not be watching them. And I understand it's trickier now with streaming services and stuff like that. I guess they can click on it later if they want and all that. But still, like, just don't watch it. You know, I don't know. I do like Aubrey Plaza because she was one of my favorite characters on Parks and Rec. But I'm probably not going to watch the show, and that's okay. And so you shouldn't either if you don't want to.
I just appreciate the fact that this is the problem. You know, like, your 11-year-old probably has an iPad and has already stumbled across porn at this point. You probably don't have parental controls on it either. But, you know, a TV show with a demon on it is the big issue here.
We
That's
make
what's ruining
worse
my child.
shows than this. We're talking about like Vampire Diaries, Legacies, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where they're all falling in love with demons. Get a grip. This is ridiculous.
I do like the About Us page on 1millionmoms.com. It says, this is the About Us page. This is the first paragraph. Mom, are you fed up with the filth many segments of our society, especially the entertainment media, are throwing at our children? Are you tired of all the negative influences our children are forced to contend with? If so, we urge you to become a member of 1millionmoms.com.
Well, and I read in the article, they were saying that, like, their big concern is that they're making, like, hell seem like kind of lighthearted or whatever. I'm like, what about Little Nicky? Remember Adam Sandler's movie? Or like
love that
I
movie.
love that movie.
Or what about, like, even recently, like The Good Place? Like, you remember that? Like,
Great
there's,
show.
I mean, but there's that they made. I mean, lots of people watched it because there's a heaven theme in it, but there's also they're making hell very lighthearted. I mean, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
like, it's just one of those things where it's like you gotta, don't watch it if you don't like it. If it's not theologically correct in
Well,
your
I'm
mind,
sure
then,
like this is going to be on probably at like 10 at night. Like I can't imagine this coming on at 4:00 in the afternoon when they get out of school.
and I will say that,
it actually airs at 8:00 on Saturday mornings.
yeah, does it really?
No,
I don't know. I have no idea. No, but I do think the complicated part about that, and I don't agree with their response, but is because of streaming services. Like, I haven't watched the show when it actually airs, and actually, I've never even watched, other than sports, I haven't watched live TV in probably 5 years. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, so like you could, if you have Hulu, they have FX on there, that type of stuff. So like you could get this show and find it, and because it's a cartoon, kids might be like, oh, okay. So, but to Kyle's point, put parental controls, that type of thing.
Well, and if we want to get people upset about bad theology in TV shows, I mean, Touched by an Angel had some of the worst theology of any show I've ever seen in my life.
I was forced to watch that.
And Early Edition, which was a great show, with the cat that showed up with the newspaper a day early to the guy, and he was like, "Oh, I've got to fix this situation."
I mean, it's like people watch racist stuff like Lord of the Rings. I mean, and so it's like you guys, everybody's all about it. So
how dare you? You wouldn't even know if it was racist or not because you won't watch it.
I did notice it was all white people in the movies. I will say that.
It is,
except for those like monster things.
Orcs, yeah.
Well, and that's a whole nother.
That's another.
That's
issue.
a whole nother section of that article that we're not going to touch today because
let's not.
Yeah, we don't have time. So, what shows were you not allowed to watch as a kid that you watched anyway?
That I watched anyways.
Yeah, or what were you not allowed to watch? Well, let's pretend that you were a good kid that never did anything wrong.
South Park. My mom was like, "Yeah, probably not to that." But we didn't really.
That
have...
show didn't come on until you were what, 25?
Like no, teenager. I was in my teens when that came on. I know, but I'm just saying like that was probably we didn't have cable.
South Park's been around a lot longer than I realized.
It's like 22 years or something.
So probably South Park. That was my parents were not strict about what I watched.
We didn't have cable.
We didn't either. We didn't have it till I was like 14.
The big show I could not watch was The Simpsons. Like that was like. And then eventually, of course, there was just all this. I'm sure there were probably sermons preached about how terrible The Simpsons are. I don't know how it got around, except for like what was that church magazine they used to have every Sunday, the Christian Standard or something, probably put an article in there. So we were not allowed to watch The Simpsons. And then one night we were at my grandparents' and my cousin was watching it. And my dad watched it with me and he was like, "Oh, that's not so bad." And I was like, "Yeah, y'all were getting so upset." So I watched it when I could, but we didn't have cable. And back then, if you wanted to watch something when it didn't air, you had to record it on a VCR. So I wasn't going to that invested. So I didn't. That was the big show with The Simpsons. We never had cable, so I didn't have to deal with like Beavis and Butthead or South Park and all that stuff. The one that my mom did not like, but me and my dad still watched all the time was Seinfeld. But I watched that show. I've seen every episode of Seinfeld. That was one of my favorites. So
what about you, Kyle?
So there were quite a bit of shows. They didn't let me watch Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Harry Potter, but they had no issues with me watching Lord of the Rings.
I don't even know what Yu-Gi-Oh! Is.
Yeah, it's like a Pokemon version, but it was a little bit more dark magic.
Okay.
But yeah, they had no issues with me watching Lord of the Rings, but they wouldn't allow me to watch Harry Potter, which doesn't make any sense.
Because of those evil witches?
Sure.
Oh, okay.
I just don't know.
Maybe they just don't like the British.
Well, my parents will listen to this, and I'll just blame it. I think they were young Christians at the time, and they just didn't know. I think that's what the excuse was.
Now I know nobody's picking on Harry Potter. I don't remember any minorities in Harry Potter. Of course, it's been a while.
Yeah, there are minorities. There's a black character and an Indian character.
Oh, one.
No, there's several different.
Okay.
I don't think so.
There's several.
Yeah.
There's a token. All
right. So this is a problem with all British writers, is what we're discovering.
Well,
yeah.
It is.
Britain does have a pretty long history of racism. Trevor Noah has a pretty funny joke about that.
Yeah.
So you have to go check that out. So I was not allowed to watch all kinds of shows, but I typically watched them anyway because I was that type of kid. Ones that you guys have already mentioned, but I wasn't allowed to watch Ren and Stimpy.
Ren and Stimpy, I forgot about
but see, that was on Nickelodeon. Yeah, I didn't have that, so that wasn't
Johnny Bravo.
I could watch Johnny Bravo.
Okay.
Salute Your Shorts.
I love that show.
I did too, but I wasn't allowed to watch it, but I did anyway. Rocco's Modern Life, which I would just blatantly tell my parents, like, I'm watching this because I like it and it's funny.
I liked Rocco too.
And I go back and I watch Rocco as an adult now, and it's like, oh my, I can see why maybe they did not want me to watch it. Episode 1, Rocco is trying to find a job, and the job that he ends up getting is a phone answerer And he's like, oh, I can do that. And then when he answers the phone, there's a thing on the wall that says, remember, be sexy, be hot, be whatever. And he answers the phone and he just goes, oh, baby, oh, baby. And it's like, as a kid, I didn't know what that was. And now as an adult, I'm like, oh yeah, no. My parents were right to not let me watch this show.
You turned out okay.
I guess. I don't know. So
I think things have changed too, though, because I think that's like the thing with The Simpsons. Like, you watched it back then, and because there was nothing like it on. I mean, because they didn't even say a lot of terrible. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was just nothing like it. But now, like, you watch TV, and it's like just about everything goes, and it's just it's crazy how much it's changed. Do you know what I'm saying? That like The Simpsons would probably be viewed as like a good family show now versus, you know, compared to like some of these other things. But
Marge and Homer never cheated on each other.
Yeah.
They stayed together for all those years.
Yep. So interesting.
Yeah, I couldn't watch Harry Potter, but me and my dad would watch MXC all the time on
Oh,
Spike
I loved
TV.
MXC.
Which, you know,
Most Extreme Challenge.
Yeah. Do you ever watch that? No. There's
It's-
definitely some racist overtones in it.
Yeah,
And very
so
blatant.
It's
So-
it's a Japanese
Sorry,
game
Dad.
show that they dubbed over in English, and so it's clearly it's like Mystery Science Theater but with a Japanese game show.
Gotcha.
It's very funny. You can't find it anywhere.
It was on Amazon Prime for a little bit. And I watched it all. And that's when I was like, wait, I watched this with my dad when I was like 9. I don't know if this is the best.
Yeah, I
okay,
don't know
can't
why
watch
people
Harry
got so
Potter.
upset about Harry Potter, because Harry Potter ends up being like a
witchcraft.
redeem, but like at the end of it, like with the king, whatever, like he goes and he's definitely got a savior, like
the King Wizard.
yeah, all that stuff. I don't remember what it was
So
called.
I actually wrote a paper in college on Harry Potter and the Bible. And it was like for a debate class of some sort. And then I handed it because I was working. I know. Well, I actually handed it to my boss because I was working at a after school program at a Baptist church. And I'm like, hey, you should read this. And then she never spoke to me again because I was like, it's
That's
fine.
Satanic Penny.
I know. Well, you know,
Yeah,
it's still amazing. I love Harry Potter.
there's wizards in the Bible, and witches, and all kinds of
That's
stuff.
right.
So if we're gonna like tackle all that stuff, then yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Wow, awkward pauses today. Just gonna say it.
I like 'em.
Pauses.
They're fun.
You know what? People in the car, as you're listening, you're probably slamming your hand into the radio thinking there's something wrong. It's not. We're just all staring at each other like idiots.
We're trying to see like who's gonna say what.
That's
next. Like who's gonna say the dumb thing like jellyfish or multi organisms?
That's okay.
But you redeemed yourself.
Because
You
of the
did.
Man of War. I knew I
Yeah.
was thinking of something along those lines, but I was way off on the jellyfish. I'll admit it.
Samsonite was way off. All right, well, that's our show for today. We can't wait to be with you again. Once again, Jeremy and I are currently in Guatemala while you're listening to this, and hopefully we will be back with you soon. Thanks for listening.